What is life? Why am I here? How is it all connected? And how am I going to navigate this beautiful but crazy journey? I'm Sylvia and welcome to the Soul Sunshine Podcast. Today I'm talking to Mark Moon. Mark is a seasoned wellness coach with over 20 years of experience, specializing in transformative breathwork sessions that offer profound inner clarity and emotional release. His personal journey through depression and perfectionism infuses his practice with deep empathy, aiding in mental clarity and emotional balance. Mark's functional movement classes are informed by his extensive training in NLP, yoga and developmental coaching, focusing on alignment and functional movement for improved physical well-being. Committed to therapeutic breathwork, Mark's holistic approach is a catalyst for personal growth and transformation. Mark is an incredible human, a beautiful soul, and I am so super excited to have him here with me today. Welcome to the Soul Sunshine Podcast, Mark. So good to have you.
Thanks, Sylvia. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me on.
Thanks for joining me. So Mark, before we are heading into our conversation today, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So today we are talking about therapeutic breathwork. We are talking about Mark's journey from being a fitness fanatic to starting to explore more of the softer modalities, which ultimately led him to explore breathwork on such a deep and transformative basis. We are diving deep into breathwork, what it is, the benefits, the experiences and the challenges that can come up. We are talking about how we deepen the connection to ourselves as well as to others through breathwork and the body themes associated with it. We are also dissecting the main developmental themes that are being explored in therapeutic breathwork and how our individual work on these can put a positive ripple effect out into the world. So lots of topics to explore today.
There is a lot there, isn't there?
I know. I'm really excited. Yeah, so Mark, we met only recently really doing an NLP course with the coaching room in Sydney, and I think I said to you when I met you, we were like talking over lunch one day, we were talking about breathwork and I was listening in and I was like, oh, so interesting because like I've been doing the podcast for a while now and I've always had breathwork on my list of topics that I really wanted to talk about, but I didn't really know anybody who did it. And I mean, it's kind of a bit of a buzzword at the moment, you know, everybody talks about it, everybody does it, it's like breathwork and ice bath, like everywhere you look, you kind of see it. But I always wanted to wait for somebody that I personally connected with before bring somebody on here and chat to somebody. And so, yeah, thank you for joining me. You're the chosen one.
I'm the chosen one. I was the next minute at lunch, there I was.
Exactly.
You ask and you receive.
Exactly. Yeah, I love that. No, that was really awesome. So, Mark, tell me a little bit about your background. You know, what is your story and where did your passion for this work start?
Yeah, so my background's actually in fitness. So I've been in personal training and group fitness for just over 25 years. A big part of my career was really focusing on the body as such. A realization I had recently was that I've spent most of my career in the fitness world working on my body, not really working in the body.
Yeah.
And it was great for a while, but then at a certain point in life, it kind of got to the point where I was like, realized that I wasn't really happy within myself and where I was and what I was doing.
And that the external fitness stuff maybe didn't do all the good, right? Like it didn't help like to make you feel better inside as well. That's what I mean.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when you go through life experiences and things happen, which happen to all of us, and sometimes we process them, sometimes we don't. For me, one of the big catalysts was dropping into a quite severe depression about 2012. And within that, realizing that I didn't really have the tools to get myself out of it safely and effectively. So I started with therapy. And even though therapy was great for a while, I always still felt like there was something that was trapped in my body that wasn't being released. I felt like I could understand what was happening with me. I could understand my mental health. But still within the body, there was something that was trapped, that was stuck there. when I come out of rehab, so I actually went into rehab for depression back in 2016. So I was seeing a Gestalt therapist. We were making great results, but she suggested that I go in and do this 30-day rehab thing, which I did. But
so that was in 2016. So you first started having the depression in 2012, you
Yeah.
said, and then in 2016 you went into that.
Yeah, and when I was in the rehab, what was interesting was I'd never really identified as being an addict as such. Like I could drink and I could not drink. I could go out and party and not go out and party. Like I never really felt like I needed substances to get by. But at the same time though, I knew that I could very easily self-sabotage and very easily not look after myself as well as I could or as well as I should be. So when I was in the rehab, I actually did my whole journaling session and my whole approach to it as a recovering perfectionist, because that's really what it was that was what I was addicted to, right? Was this whole need to be perfect and get everything right and look and present a certain way, which then had me realize that that's pretty much how I lived most of my life in the fitness world, where everything was focused on how do I look on the outside? What do people, think when they see me? How do I present to the world?
Do you think that's where it came from? Where did it come from originally?
Yeah, so look, how long do we have? Like, what age do I go back to and start talking about from here? What's really interesting, and I'll try not to sort of jump from topic to topic too much, but one of the reasons why I talk about and focus about the body themes in breathwork so much is because it really does take us back to what happens in our developmental years in the womb to about 7 or 8 years old. And it's quite significant because then we do go back and we do start to realize, hey, when I was in my, 3, 4, 5-year-old stages, I was the youngest sibling that used to get picked on, or I was the oldest sibling that had responsibility from parents, or I used to get bullied at school, or whatever it sort of was that you can go back and reflect on. And I remember in those earlier years, if I didn't do well at something, the comment from my father especially would be like, well, how can you do better next time? And so not really thinking anything of it at the time, but then when you reflect back at a later stage in life, you can start to realize what parts of your early childhood, what parts of your early schooling years, what parts of your early teenage years have really started to shape who we become as a person, how our personality gets constructed, and who we take ourselves to be, which isn't who we really are. Yeah.
And it's sometimes those small things, right, that you think back of and do, like your dad probably, he didn't mean any harm by doing that, by saying that. He maybe just wanted to support you or, help you to, be even better. While if you have the accumulative process of that over your whole life,
Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest learning curves I've had through my journey through NLP and other life coaching modalities, breathwork and everything that I've done, one of the biggest healing parts of that was being able to realize that, and I'm only speaking for myself here, for other people it might be different, is that most of the things that our parents did actually had our best interests at heart.
100%.
Like the strict upbringing, the rules, all these things was for a parent really wanting the best for their child. And I've actually recently made a big lifestyle shift and moved back in with my parents at, 48 years old. And it might sound really odd to a lot of people, but it's actually also a really deeply profound part of this whole growing and continually learning experience for me.
And I would think of the healing journey.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely, because one of the things that I've become so much more aware of the last couple of years since I've been really diving into this whole therapeutic breathwork process with myself and as a facilitator is that I need to be stepping up and stepping in and really dropping into the practices and the processes that I take people through. And the healing of, being back home with your parents at this stage of life, and something really, really, really simple, like it might sound like nothing, but a couple of weekends ago, I'm sitting there on the lounge room floor. I like to get up early in the morning and I do my meditation, and Mum and Dad are up super early and the TV goes on and they've got the newspapers everywhere and, it's noisy, and I just like to have peace and quiet in the morning and sit and do my meditation first. And I remember sitting in meditation and I could hear one of them walking past me, and I started to cringe in my body, and then I stopped for a moment and I thought, what is it that's arising in me at this point in time? And as I sat with it, judgment come up. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, I was like, they're judging me. And I was just like, actually, no, I'm judging myself and I'm judging them.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm sitting here thinking, they're judging me because I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and meditate for the first hour, and I do yoga and I do breath work and, all these weird things. But they're actually not judging me at all. Like, they're actually super, super interested.
Yeah.
And they ask questions about it all the time. And it's quite interesting and reflective and introspective to be able to then go, actually, out of everything that I've been through, like, what's been my part and my role in that?
Yeah.
And how do I, put my bullshit back onto my parents and those around me? Like, we quite often think that it's what was done to us, but at the same time, though, it's like, actually, what was our role in that, and how did we play a part in how this all unfolded?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a long way of saying that I've made some big lifestyle shifts recently.
Yeah. No, but I love it because I totally resonate with when you're saying that, because sometimes I think you're obviously growing up and you do sometimes feel judged by your parents, or they feel like they know better than you, or whatever it may be, and then I've caught myself in exactly the same thing, where I felt so frustrated because I felt like they didn't like what I was doing, but then I was also like subconsciously judging them for what they were doing, and only once I realized that, I was like, okay, it does go both ways, because sometimes it can be a bit of your blind spot, when
Absolutely.
it comes to your parents, I think. But then that realization of, okay, like, they just living the life the way that they want to live it, and that's okay, and I live my life the way that I want to live it, and that's also okay, So as long as there's that mutual respect there. So your story really resonates with that.
Absolutely, and it's true too in all of our other relationships.
Exactly.
With our intimate relationships with partners, or relationships with our friends, our work colleagues, and one of the things that I love about the breathwork process is, especially with therapeutic breathwork, is that it invites us to really start to get curious and look at all parts of ourselves. Yeah. And so it's a very holistic approach that works in the body from a bottom-up approach, and then also works in the mind from a head or a top-down approach as well. So it is a very holistic healing model that has us look at all parts of our psychology, all parts of our physiology, looking at the way that we show up in the world, and then also taking the time to look at the shadow parts of ourselves and all the parts that we can't see that is still how we're showing up in the world. Mm-hmm. It comes into a lot of the inner child healing as well. So the stuff that I'm doing at the moment, like going back to, the parents, and
because it will bring up so much as well at the same
Absolutely.
time, right? It brings it up, but at the same time, there's this beautiful space for healing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned recently is that it's okay to ask for help, and it's okay to let people support you. So my body theme that I talk about a lot with the breath work is what would be called the rigid or the energetic grounded, which each of these body types, which I'll go into more detail in each one in a little bit, has a core wounding as such. And so with my one, it's very much around a shielding of the heart, and can be the inability to accept love. And one of the biggest things I've realized recently is that it's actually okay to let people, I haven't got to do everything myself, right? So my body theme can be very much like, I can do it myself. I don't need your help. No one's going to let me down, because if I do it myself, it'll be done properly.
Yeah. I might as well do it myself.
Absolutely. But then what happens is you end up getting severely burnt out, which is a process that I went through, highly stressed, dysregulated nervous system. Next minute, you've got severe depression or severe anxiety, your life is an absolute mess, and you're sitting there thinking, why? And really what it is being able to look at it and go, okay, so it's all of these things that we're quite often doing to ourselves.
And it's that taking the responsibility back into our own hands, right?
Absolutely.
Because it is sometimes easier to be like, oh, if that person would have done this, or if this person would have done that, or if my parents would have not done this, I would be okay. But it's at the end of the day, like you said so beautifully at the beginning as well, it's like everybody has, something in their life that's challenging, or has gone through difficult times, tough times, whatever it may have been. So it's always about how can we work on it on our own again, to regulate ourselves again, because we are the only ones that can make the difference at the end of the day.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And so you were going into rehab.
Yes.
Just to kind of finish that thought
bring us
really
back.
quickly. Now, because you've started talking about a few things like, the body types and stuff that we obviously are going to go into it in a bit more detail. But I'm just interested how that journey into breathwork came then, because you went into rehab and then you came out of it. And I know there's this really kind of funny story around you studying yoga as well, which
Yes.
I really like. So how did you end up at breathwork, coming from that real like physical fitness, everything is kind of about the appearance, about that outer self, to really kind of starting to look more internally and realizing that this is actually, just as important. I don't want to say it's more important or less important as the physical aspect. I think they're both equally as important,
Yeah, exactly. You are right. They are both as equally as important as each other. When I came out of the rehab, my therapist suggested that I start doing some sort of meditation. So my first, I guess, taste of meditation was Buddhist meditation. So I took myself up to a Buddhist center in Surrey Hills near where I was living.
I used to go to that one on South Dowling
that's the one.
Street. I used to go there at some point as well.
So that one. And so at that stage, I'd kind of cut my work schedule back a little bit. So I started going here a few days a week to the drop-in classes. And I really started to enjoy that. But I struggled to actually meditate. But those classes were more around listening to the philosophy. And it was just a nice introduction into Buddhist philosophy, which led into yogic philosophy. But not so much going into deep meditation. It was more sort of listening to the teachings and the learnings and starting to absorb those into it. Me being a perfectionist and wanting to, be good at everything, then obviously started to study that in more detail. And one of my coaches at the time had suggested that it would be really beneficial for me to probably do yoga. And he kind of based that a bit on my Enneagram type, being a type 3.
Okay.
And he'd made a, off-the-cuff kind of comment that a lot of type 3s, when they do go through a developmental awakening as such, or some kind of big stage shift or process, they will quite often go into yoga or some kind of more mind-body therapy kind of approach. And I was like, you got to be fucking kidding me. Like, I am not doing yoga. It's like, because I absolutely hated it. I really did. Like, mainly because I wasn't good at it and it was absolutely painful.
Yeah.
It really was. Like, for me, sitting in meditation when I first started was excruciatingly painful. I would get severe pains in the middle upper back on the left-hand side, and it would be like somebody was literally stabbing me in between the shoulder blades. And that would start happening after a couple of minutes of sitting still.
Yeah, wow.
Now I can kind of sit like this for hours and I'm totally fine.
Yeah.
But that's what would come up for me. And when I would go to do yoga, it was similar. Like, every posture was painful, was tough, it was hard.
I can still relate with that.
And and some of that is really around the rigidity of the amount of training that I'd done for so many years, and so focused on the armoring or the external interior, which, funnily enough, all the things that I've learned from the body themes and the therapeutic breath work, I'm going to say, oh, that's from that. Oh, that makes sense. Oh, that makes sense. Oh, that's where that goes in.
It's like all the pieces of the puzzle
all the pieces fitting together.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of this armoring around the body. So yoga was very difficult. But at the same time, I was like, if this is going to help me and I want to improve, then I'm going to go down this road. Next minute, I'm off to India, sitting in an ashram at Shivananda for 4 weeks, because if you're going to do it, you got to be good, right?
You got to do it. Got to do it properly.
Exactly right. So next thing you know, I'm diving into yogic philosophy, reading all the books, going off to India, in the ashram, all that stuff.
That would have been an amazing experience in itself.
It was absolutely amazing. Yeah. What I've realized now is that at the time, I never fully comprehended where I was and what I was doing, and what an amazing experience that it was.
Even at that point.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm actually heading back later this year.
Yeah.
Because now I'm just like,
you'll take it all in.
Take it all in. The first time I was there, it was more ticking boxes and, going to the best school and, doing all the things.
Building the life CV, right?
Absolutely.
Like all the things that you've done and accomplished.
But still an important part of the process, because it's got me to here. And I am a firm believer that as good or as bad as we think things are at any certain point in time, they're how they need to be.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Because they do really give us the tools and the learnings and the understandings. And if things keep happening to us all the time that we don't think are the way we want or we're going well, like, it really is life continually kicking us up the arse, going like, have you not learnt this lesson yet? Like,
here I am again.
Okay, here we go again. Come on, let's go around the block again.
Exactly.
Like life will take you, I think, where it needs you to go.
Yeah.
To finally be like, oh, well, that's what I meant to learn.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, we've probably all been there, right? But it's this coming back again and then always getting just a slightly bit more uncomfortable and then again and again until you go like, okay, I really actually need to change something, or I really want to change something,
Absolutely.
I don't want to do this anymore.
And, creating change can get very uncomfortable.
It
so
usually is, yeah.
It's actually a really good spot to be as long as you're in the discomfort and you can be regulated in the nervous system. So if you go into a very uncomfortable situation with too much dysregulation in the body, then it can be very jarring and almost damaging. But then if you can go into a situation where you are challenged in a way that you're still regulated, then it can very much drop you into a space of deep development and actualization, really. Yeah. So I think that's always something to remember, is that stress is a necessary part of change done in a regulated way.
Yeah.
For me at that point in time, there was still a lot of dysregulation in the body. So it was very challenging. But at the same time though, I knew that life wasn't working out as well as I would want it to, or as well as it could, so I had to make some changes. So I just kept at it and pretty much just started doing less fitness, more yoga, less fitness, more yoga. And one thing I've always been quite good at over the years is reinventing myself or making the change that I need to make to move into the next phase of my life. And I knew that it was time to move into the next phase, which was less fitness, more yoga, and something that was more of a true holistic approach to what I do. I knew that I always wanted to work with people.
Yeah.
I've always loved teaching group fitness and personal training and working with people like in or on their body in a way that really does help them get the most out of life. And I've, even through times of the darkest depression, I've always still been able to look at the positive side of things, or look at what the advantage of that could be, or how I can still improve moving forward. I never really got stuck in a deep victim or mentality mode of thinking that I couldn't get out of this. I was, okay, things are really shit right now. I don't feel amazing. I know I'm in a bad spot. What do I need to do to get out of it?
That's really amazing though. That's quite incredible, because, when you are in that really dark spot, sometimes life can just feel really overwhelming,
Absolutely.
It's the fact that you are always seeing the light at the end of the tunnel of where you needed to go and what you needed to do in order to get out of it is pretty incredible, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's probably one of the best things that I've had, is to have that mindset to then go. And that's what I've always enjoyed being able to share with and help people with when it comes to training or working with clients. And so I started teaching more yoga, and then one of the yoga studios that I was teaching at, they had a lady come in and do a breathwork session one time. And I had no idea what it is or what we were doing. So we did this breathwork session, and it was what we would call rebirthing breathwork. There's plenty of different names for breathwork techniques or styles, but the types that use what we call a conscious connected breathing technique, where we continually breathe from the inhale to the exhale with no pauses between the two. It's like a circular motion of the breath. Takes you into an altered state of consciousness. It takes you into a deep journey that really does get into your body. It opens up the energy channels, it energizes the body, and whatever's there that's stuck is going to start to be released. And that was the first time I'd experienced something like that, that really had me so connected to and feeling into all parts of my body. It was absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Like I finished that. I remember finishing that session and I was just like laughing hysterically. It was like a...
out of joy.
Yeah, and I just felt so much bliss in my body. And the lady who ran that, I actually then started doing private sessions with her, because I was just like, this is the next thing that I need to do.
There's something into that.
There's something in this, because I'd always felt like my mind was clear, but there was something in the body, and this was what was really getting me into my body.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I did one-on-one breath work for about the next 12 months, about once a month. And every session was different. Every session would take me into a different release of some sort. Sometimes it was a lot of crying. Sometimes it was a lot of laughing and happy memories. Sometimes anger would come up and there'd be a lot of aggression that would come out. And what the commonality was each time I finished, I was left with really profound moments of clarity, like things just made such perfect sense. And that's probably the biggest feedback that I get from people that do sessions with me now, is they finish and they go, something that I've been pondering on or something that I wasn't sure about just dropped in, and it was super clear what I need to do next. The clarity was just so profound that I just know what I need to do next moving forward.
That's amazing.
So when I took that journey, once again, that kind of got me into that area of, how do I learn more about this? Like, this is amazing.
The next step.
This is the next step. Like, this is what I want to do. And so from there, I just started, diving into different breathwork courses, reading different books. And then the very first breathwork training that I was on, I read a book that's called Breakthrough with Breathwork. It's by a guy called Jim Morningstar in the USA. And so here's the one that's really got me excited about these different body themes that he works with in what he calls therapeutic breathwork. And I think for me that was so appealing because I was still working in the body, and I felt like there was a real correlation between me and the physical aspects of my body and how they actually come out as or manifest as behavior patterns. And so with body themes, we take on postures, beliefs, and behavior patterns that have been developed in early childhood that shape who we are. And if you look at it from an energetical point of view, like our energetical structure and energy makeup will then manifest into our physical makeup. So we go from the subtle energy into the concrete or the physical structure of our body.
In terms of an example, for people to understand that concept better, can you give us an example of how that would manifest, or how you would look at somebody and see that?
So as a really simple example, you can look at somebody and you can know, are they feeling flat? Are they a bit hunched over? You can know if somebody's energetically closed off because the arms are folded, or the shoulders are rounding forward, or the head's dropped down. You can see when somebody is confident and open and their chest is wide, their shoulders are back and down, their chin is up, they make eye contact with you. Like, that's just a really simple way to look at it and know somebody's. Look at the way someone walks. Do they drag their feet? Have they got a spring in their step? Like, really, really simple things we can look at and see. But when it dives into the more sort of, details of the body structures, the 5 or 6 main themes that we look at is, the first one is a connection theme. And it comes into safety in the body. And when somebody doesn't feel safe, they can often be frozen. And so if this is your dominant theme, you can very much have a frozen appearance, can often be quite narrow across the chest and the shoulders, and usually more of a slim type of build. The next theme goes into an attunement theme, which can often be depleted, so they can collapse. So the first one can freeze, the second one can collapse. From there it goes into a trust or a control theme. And so this theme can often be a bit more top heavy in the upper body, because it's a bit more of an overpowering type of body structure or physicality. Think of your average gym junkie who just trains upper body all the time, no legs, big arms and biceps, That's your classic kind of overpowering body type. And then it moves into more of a body theme that is rounded, or it can be called the enduring body theme, which is more around autonomy and being able to express ourselves freely. And then it moves into the 5th and 6th theme, which comes into sexual identity and then intimacy and love. And depending on whose philosophy you follow, like this all dates back to the 1920s, 1930s. So it's not new stuff, but it's stuff that hasn't really been looked at for a long time, or it's kind of been a bit off to the side as that's
not integrated in other work.
Yeah. And I think back then too, it was kind of seen as a bit like not real therapy.
Out there.
You know, because back then it went more into psychotherapy, cognitive behavior therapy, more of those traditional mind therapy types of processes, which is still really beneficial. But a lot of the time though, it kind of can cut you off at the neck. And so it's all up here. What do you think about that? You know, what does that mean to you? That's all up here, like thinking. But then what these therapies do is they get us into the feeling and drop us right down. And so, and I talk about this in meditation, like when you're dropping into your body, what it really means is to get you out of your head and drop you deep into the belly, like get into the gut. So when we say like, you know, get to the core of it, get to the guts of it, it's what we actually really mean. Like, and if you think about a lot of different sayings that we have, they actually relate to certain things in the body. Get out of your head, you know, get to the core of the situation, like, you know, what's your gut instinct? Like all these things, they actually start to make sense when you think about them from more of a somatic point of view.
So it's really interesting with those themes. Let me go back to those for a second because they're quite complex. So you're saying that based on our upbringing and based on the developmental stages and the development that we're going through, what's happening energetically is manifesting physically, and then that's the way that we show up in the world. And then when we do breath work, that's where we can then start working on some of those things that we've been carrying around with us throughout our whole lives, right?
Absolutely.
And then that's how we can release that.
Yes, and so what you'll notice with each of the themes is they'll have an unintegrated and an integrated aspects. And it doesn't matter what personality typing system that you're looking at. All of them will have the strengths and the weaknesses, or the integrated and the unintegrated aspects of self. They'll all have the core wounding. They all have so many commonalities between them. And so it's not to say that your body shape is going to dramatically change, because we will have a dominant theme that will be it's like your zodiac sign, like you'll always be a Libran or an Aries or a Cancerian or whatever it is, like you don't change
Aquarius.
that. Yeah, Aquarius. But, so that won't change, but as you start to learn more about the character traits, we can then start to see what's running us, what is subconscious behaviors, what is out of our awareness, and then we start to bring things into our field of awareness. And that's something that they refer to in meditation as well, right? So the highest form of meditation is to be able to connect with the awareness that is the witness to the body, the thoughts, the emotions, the personality. But what is it that's constantly aware of that? Like that awareness never changes. So our body theme as such won't change, but we can be aware of what our core wounding has done to us, what beliefs that has ingrained into us, what behavior patterns that has gifted us. Because really what they are survival patterns. So they're beliefs, behaviors, shapes, postures that we take on to survive. And so as we learn more about those, we have the ability to be able to see the limitations and be able to soften them and release them, so that they're not limitations anymore. They become integrated, and so we're more connected to our core strengths rather than being run by our core weaknesses.
And that's something where therapeutic breathwork can help. That's what you were saying, right?
Absolutely.
That's what Jim Mornington started, and that's the breathwork that you facilitate.
That's right. So once I read his book, I was just like, this is the guy I want to learn from. So me being me, reached out to him, and just by chance he had an online module coming up in a couple of months' time. So obviously that was done live from the USA. I was here in Sydney, so I spent 8 nights from midnight till 8 a.m. the next day doing all the online modules, and then doing some private mentoring with him online. And then last year I went over and did his 5-day residential training in Wisconsin. And so I've continued to train with him one-on-one and learn from him, because I've just found that his style resonates with me because the body themes are there, but then also the approach to it is a more gentle approach to breath work as well. And we can talk about that as well, like the different styles of breath work and all the different directions that it can go.
Yeah, because that's what I was going to go into next, like in terms of breath work. So we've now learned that you're doing therapeutic breath work. And like I said at the beginning, breath work is such a buzzword, you know, and you hear it everywhere. Obviously, Wim Hof, you know, with the ice bathing and the breath work that blew it up everywhere. And since then, it's just like, at least I feel like in Bondi, in Sydney, it's just kind of, pops up everywhere. So talk us through the different breath techniques, you know, and what the differences are between those, why you would choose one over the other, or how you can interrelate them even, you know?
Yeah. So something that I always talk about when I run my workshops is getting people to understand that there's basically two main directions that I think it goes. And so the first one is more of your functional breathing techniques that you would use on a daily basis. I think this is where a lot of the yogic breathing techniques come into play, where a lot of the Wim Hof style breathing comes into play, coherent breathing, alternate nostril breathing, a few rounds of an active breath to energize you. And these are all really, really amazing and extremely important and very profound techniques that we can use on a daily basis.
They're almost like your daily meditation, you know, you do like, because people say like you do your meditation, you do your breath work, and then you kind of start off the day.
That's exactly right. So I put them into that category, and you can kind of pull something out of that toolbox for whatever it is that you might need throughout the day. So if you're getting a mid-afternoon slump and you need to do a few rounds of active breath, rather than having an afternoon coffee, you can do a few rounds of this. If you're running into a meeting and you're feeling a bit stressed and frazzled, there's a technique you can do just to calm the nervous system, quieten the mind, and just bring you back into the body.
Which is really supportive and helpful for an everyday basis, right?
And they are the ones that you would do more often. So they're super important because they're the daily breathing techniques that are really the foundation of like having a shower, brushing your teeth, you know, looking after yourself. So they fit into that category of your daily maintenance, or what we call functional breathing. And then the other side of it, which is the breathwork journey that people would talk about, or the therapeutic breathwork, or the rebirthing breathwork, or psychedelic breathwork, holotropic breathwork. Like there's so many aliases or names for processes that use the same technique, which is this connected breathing that takes people into really, really deep places for emotional release, trauma release, deep regulation of the nervous system. Can take you through a rebirthing process, which is what rebirthing is all about. So you can relive and process your birth experience if it was traumatic for you.
Your actual birth experience.
Yes, absolutely. You can go into past life regressions. You can have extremely mystical experiences. I always say to people before the workshops start, there's three main parts to a breathwork journey. The first one can be a very physical experience, where you might get lots of different sensations that move through the body, cramping, trembling, shaking, a spontaneous moving. The next is an emotional experience, which could be screaming, laughing, shouting, crying. And then we have the spiritual or the mystical experience. Some people will have just one of those. Some people will have a combination of all three at different points throughout that journey.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I went to one of your breathwork sessions just the other week, and I remember you talking about that at the beginning, you know, or the things that could potentially happen. And it's been my first ever session, so I didn't have any experience with it. And for me personally, I was really in that physical realm, you know. I had a lot of the shaking and the trembling and the kind of like uncomfortable, like moving around, but lots of shaking. But it was really interesting to hear and be aware of what was going on outside of me in the room, because like you said, there was laughing, there was crying, you know, there was like all sorts of different things. And I found that really interesting because in my head I was like, and I think I said that to you after the session, I was like, oh, I was hoping for some spiritual enlightenment. going into the session. But then is it something that's quite linear in terms of you moving through those, physical, emotional, spiritual, or is it not really linear? Is it more like based on the day and the person, and it could take you anywhere kind of thing?
It's absolutely not a linear approach to it.
Yeah.
It's just explaining to people what can happen.
Yeah.
So that there is some expectations around what might happen in the body so that they're not taken too much by surprise. Mm-hmm. But there's really no way to say what experience you're going to have, and it's not a progression from one experience to the other.
And it's also not like, hey, I've done it for a year, so I'm more likely to have a spiritual journey rather than a physical one. It's not like that, right?
No, because we're constantly processing. So for a lot of people, first starting out, it can tend to be more physical or emotional.
Yeah.
Because we're starting the initial phases of releasing what's trapped in the body.
Yeah.
So everything that's happened to us from our time in the womb up until present day is still in the body somewhere. Mm-hmm. So what this process does is it continually releases that. It's a constant processing, like it's never a one and done. It's not like, I've done a breathwork session, I had an amazing release and I, got all this stuff out of my body and now I'm done. Like, that's just not the way it is at all. As profound as that one experience might be, it's not a one and done process. It's like anything. It's like, you don't go to the gym and have one amazing workout. It's like, I'm in great shape for the rest of my life. Here I am.
I wish that was true.
Right? How much easier? Well, my life would be a whole different story, wouldn't it?
On the gym side, I'm like, that would be so handy.
Right, exactly. It's like you don't have one healthy meal and you've got an amazing gut health.
It's the same with therapy, right? I always
Absolutely.
compare it with therapy. People like have a difficult time. They go through, see a therapist, a coach, and they're like, I'm going to have like a session or two and I'll be fine. I'm like, well, most likely you won't be fine because it's been taking a pretty long time to get to the state where you are at now. Yes. So there's a lot. And usually once you start uncovering things, it's like Pandora's box and it's all coming out. So similar with the breathwork sessions as well.
Absolutely. So it's a constant processing, and the more you do it, the more you process. The more that you can trust the process and really get in tune with your body. Curiosity is a big part of it. And trust is a big part of it as well.
And openness, right?
And openness as well. Yeah. And these, once again, come back and relate to these different body themes again as well. I can see it in the way someone breathes, not just in the way that they hold themselves or their body shape. And you can also usually see it in their approach to the process and their approach to life as well. And so what we can then start to do is get more curious around not just what our body theme is, but then how does that show up and where does that support us in life? Yeah. Where does that hold us back in life? It links into the strengths and the weaknesses.
I love that.
If you look at it, so basically somebody who's in those first two realms of connection and attunement, which is some sort of safety fear in the body or abundance depletion in the body. So Jim calls the first one the psychic sensitive, which is very much around fear or safety in the body. So it's moving them from a fear state into a safe state. And if you look at any healing modality, what is the foundation of that? Safety.
Yeah.
Like for somebody to actually be able to go into a deep healing process or any process, they need to feel safe.
Yeah.
That's true for all areas of life, right? And if you look at any modality that is going to do some kind of deep healing, your body needs to feel safe and be regulated. If you don't feel safe, it's very, very hard to be your best.
Yeah, that's very true.
And it makes sense then that that's actually the base theme. So once we feel safe, we can then start to go deeper into the process. The second theme, which is abundance and depletion, once again, can struggle quite a bit with taking a lot of energy into the body too fast. So you've got to be a little bit careful with these body themes because it can be a very physical experience that they might freeze or shut down. And so sometimes with those, I advise to take a slightly more gentle approach to the breathing so that they're still amplifying the energy and they're still going to release, but they're not going to overwhelm themselves with the process.
Yeah, okay.
And how this becomes so beautifully useful is that it helps me guide people through the process so that they get a much better outcome and they're not disconnect or switch off from it or be too overwhelmed the first time through. For some people, especially if they're very frozen, It only takes a little bit of breathing, and the next minute they're feeling all these sensations through the body that can be so overwhelming. It's like they don't feel safe.
Yeah.
Fear takes over, and they shut down.
Yeah. And you would just notice that as somebody being like really kind of
they're literally frozen.
Yeah.
They're literally just like frozen and can't move. And that's not going to help them at all because they have a lot of fear in the body already. And then the next couple of body themes, they struggle to let go. And so, because they're more of the overpowering, wanting to be in control.
Yeah, yeah.
So these are the ones that I'm always going to release the exhales, relax, relax, relax. Because they'll take big, deep breaths, but then they won't let go.
Yeah.
They want to control and hold on.
Yeah.
And so really what they're doing is they're holding on to whatever it is that they want to release because they have trouble letting go.
Yeah.
They like to be in control. So for them, it's building the base of safety and then building the base of being able to surrender. So the opposite of control is to surrender and just let it all fall out.
Yeah.
Yep. And so these kind of body themes are people that you might see more in a corporate world that are more outcome orientated, more success driven. And then the last couple of body themes, which is the one that I am, it's really about finding balance and integrating and being open to new experiences. A bit of control comes into that, but it's very much around being able to just allow the process to take you where it wants you to go. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be right. And opening up to love, really, because that's the intimacy part of the body theme. And so how it gets so powerful is that just by knowing your body theme really helps you drop into a more useful approach right from the word go. Yeah.
And I love what you just said before as well, and that I guess comes back to what you said at the beginning as well, in terms of it being such a holistic approach, that based on those body themes and the way that people show up within the breathwork sessions and, you know, how they're able to move through that is also a reflection of how they move through life and how they move through, you know, everyday challenges and things that are happening to them.
Absolutely, yeah.
So having that awareness, right, it always starts with that awareness, having that awareness of that's going on within my body, that's the energy that's manifesting and that's how I'm showing up within this context, and then looking at my outside world and looking at how I show up in everyday life. I mean, that's huge, right?
Yes, yeah. And it's no different to other personality tests.
No, but it's always helpful, right? I always
Absolutely.
think like the more you can know yourself and the more intrinsically small things you can know about yourself, the better you can show up and the better you can work on yourself and, you know, develop yourself and be on that journey of self-development.
Yeah, absolutely. Because what it does is it helps us be able to see what our blind spots are, and then it helps us be more connected to what our strengths are.
Exactly, yeah.
And it helps us be able to then navigate what our next steps are and how we can continually move forward. And it goes through, you know, different phases, kind of swinging from right to left, like it's not just one straight line. Sometimes we feel like everything's going really, really well and it's all amazing. Other times it's like, what just happened? And it goes in the other direction. And that's part of the whole process of, you know, unfolding, learning more, developing further. And quite often when we go through those phases of thinking that things are starting to fall apart a little bit, actually what's happening is they're unraveling.
Yeah.
And so if we can always come back to what's the outcome of this going to be, or where is this taking me? It's like, it's very easy sometimes, and I had this conversation with a client the other day, that we can often get attached to what's going wrong or what we think isn't working for us. But if we can spin that around and focus on where that's actually taking us forward in the right direction, like a little reframe, like people might say we're falling apart, but then if that's actually just an unraveling, like, isn't that quite beautiful?
It is. And the thing that comes up for me when you talk about that is like also not being obsessed, and I'm talking about myself there because I like to know where I'm going, but being okay with the outcome just unfolding.
Yes.
You know, like not feeling like you need to reach this certain point, but trusting that the right point will start to show up.
Yes, that's
by
right.
itself.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely. And that's been a big part of my own journey, And where breathwork has been so profound for me is that it's probably the first time in my life where I've just taken my hands off the steering wheel, just been like, just take me where you're taking me.
So that's what breathwork has enabled you to just really kind of relax, trust, the process and be okay with what wants to unfold.
Absolutely. And it's still a processing.
Yeah.
Like I'm definitely nowhere near done, that's for sure.
We're never done.
And we're never done, right?
Yeah.
But there's a continuation of things moving forward and things continually unwinding and unfolding. And definitely, without a doubt, breathwork has been the most profound thing for me to continue that process in quite significant, noticeable amounts. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I know we like to quantify things as humans, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we've already talked about the fact that, it's not going to help if you go to, it's not going to harm you if you go to one breathwork session, but it's not going to be a lasting effect, But in terms of going to the breathwork sessions and the work that you do, what do you recommend? Is it something that you should do once a week, once a month? Is it something where you feel like the benefits come quite quickly? Is it something where you feel like you need to go for 6 months before you feel the benefits? Like, what's your experience with that? I know it's hard to quantify those things and we don't necessarily have to, but just as a bit of a guideline, I guess.
The first thing that I always say to people is it comes down to readiness. It's like, how ready are you and how far do you want to go? And it's like anything in life. It's, we can say that we don't want to work too hard or attach to the work. And you'll hear this, being and doing thrown around in the developmental world or the spiritual world all the time. It's like, well, what does that even mean? Because we're always looking for that balance of both, right?
Yeah.
Not doing and being still has an amount of doing in it, because you actually have to do something, you have to not do something,
Yeah,
so,
plus if you don't do anything, you will want to do something.
Exactly, so always looking for the balance. So with the breath, it really comes down to the readiness of the person wanting to dive in and put in the work to then be able to reap the benefits of life flowing effortlessly. And I do believe that we have to put in the work to then be able to be in the flow.
Yeah.
Because what it comes down to is being highly regulated in the nervous system and being able to give ourselves the tools and the daily processes that support that environment for us to happen. So I'm a firm believer that people need to have some form of daily practicing, whether that's a little bit of coherent breathing in the morning or a bit of active breathing in the morning, a meditation, journaling practice, something that's constantly got us in the mindset of how do we optimize our environment on a daily basis.
Yeah, because it doesn't really help if you just living a really unconscious life and then you go to breathwork once a week. That's not going to do much either, is it?
Well, that's exactly right. So there's a couple of different parts to it. People will have usually enough of an experience the first time to keep them curious.
Yeah.
But then it can go in a couple of different directions because some people might have an experience that they're not quite ready for. And so there could be a bit of resistance to that.
Yeah.
And then other people are just like, okay, well, that was really interesting. I want to know more.
Yeah.
And then some people just aren't that interested in their development or just aren't ready yet to take the process.
Yeah.
So it's really quite broad and varied depending on where the person is at or what their level of readiness is.
Yeah.
For most people, most of my clients will do quite a few sessions to start off with, maybe a session of 6 to 10, a week or 2 weeks apart, and then do monthly workshops as maintenance. Some people might do a couple of sessions and then they kind of drop off and then they come back 6 months later. Some people just drop in and do the monthly workshops and are kind of in a maintenance phase already, and that gives them enough of what they need. It's really hard to sort of pinpoint exactly what the protocol is, but for most people, they will get enough of an experience the first time to spark that interest, but then it really comes down to readiness and what they're willing to tap into.
Yeah.
So if you're going to start the process, then I think you do need to be ready to continue the process.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Are
once
you telling
again,
me to come back?
what's that?
Are you telling me to come back?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I know I have to.
Everyone has to go back. But it is like anything. I say this all the time. It's like whether it's your diet or your exercise or your yoga or your relationships, like how deep do you want your relationships to go? How deep do you want your personal health to go? How do you want to play out?
Yeah, exactly. And it is this what we've already discussed, right? It's like, yeah, you go to the gym once, you feel great, you don't go back, it's not going to last, right? And so I think it's just about finding the things that work for you, you know, and then doing them on a consistent basis, so you're actually reaping the rewards. Because if you just do them super sporadically, you might not get the rewards that are on offer.
Absolutely. And then it also comes down to why people are doing it. And so, for example, psychedelic breathwork or DMT breathwork, quite often people are chasing a high, or they're chasing an experience, or they're attaching to what they want to get out of an outcome. So what can often happen is you can do a few therapeutic sessions, and maybe around 3 or 4, you might start to hit a bit of a roadblock because something might start to come up that you're not quite ready to process yet, or that you want to start to resist. Some sessions can be these big, profound, magical experiences where you're just like, oh my God, that was the most amazing thing I've ever experienced in my whole life. And then the next session, you can be like, oh, nothing really happened. And then quite often they can be like, oh, well, I'm not going to do that again for a while because it didn't really sort of give me the results last time. That's where the work's just beginning. Because it starts to show you what you attach to, or because we've all got motivation strategy, right? Towards or away.
Yeah.
So we're either moving towards pleasure or away from pain.
Yeah.
And so as you can start to identify that, you can see the people who are constantly chasing pleasure, constantly chasing the high, constantly chasing the big experience that's going to give them this amazing feeling of euphoria through the body. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I don't think it's as therapeutic as it can be, because it's really just feeding the fire.
And it's not realistic, right?
Absolutely
not. When you're
not.
Looking at life, like it's not always just the high.
That's exactly right. And so some of the sessions where you don't think a lot's happened, quite often, very subtly, there's a lot going on in the nervous system that's extremely and deeply regulating for your body. And sometimes those very seemingly uneventful processes are actually much deeper for you than the big experiences.
It's interesting that you're saying that, because that reminds me of Vedic meditation. And I know you are also a meditator. And my meditation teacher, he talks about that as well. Because, when you're having one of those really deep and blissful meditations where you come out and you just feel like, oh my God, that was so good. And then sometimes you feel like you're so in your head and you can't really go deep, and everything's just happening. And he said sometimes those are actually the more powerful ones, because they are the ones that are really releasing a lot of the stress and the things that are, not serving you anymore. They don't feel as good, but they're actually sometimes even more powerful than the other ones. And that's exactly what you're saying with breathwork as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so one of the experiences that we can have is what we call a yogic or a deep sleep state, which is similar to what can happen when you're in yoga nidra, where your body goes into a very deep state of relaxation, where you're still conscious, but it can seem like you've gone to sleep.
I'm pretty sure that's what I was in when I was doing
and most people do
towards the end. Yeah.
And I remember a lady who came to a workshop a couple of times, and then on the third one, remember at the end, she's like, I think I slept for all of that. Like, that was a waste of time.
That's what I said. I didn't say it was a waste of time, but I remember messaging you. I was like, I was either in the deepest meditation or I actually fell asleep. I'm not 100% sure towards the end when you were doing the sound healing to round it up. Yeah.
And so you are in this yogic deep sleep state where your body is extremely regulated. It's in a deep restorative state that is very, very beneficial for you.
Yeah, it feels great. I love it.
And what's happening is, and we talk to this a lot, is that our body knows how to self-regulate, and it knows how to auto-correct when we put it in the right environment.
Yeah.
So if you look at epigenetics, which is a whole other podcast we can do, but it's all about what is the environment that you are in. And so the environment that we are in creates the conditions that we adapt to. And so sometimes in these really, really deep states of meditation, these really, yogic deep sleep states, we're creating the optimal environment for our body to recover and to regulate in the nervous system. And that's what actually most people need. But it can be very easy though to get attached to, or you'll see it on Instagram all the time, of the latest breathwork session and these big cathartic releases and people crying and screaming and shouting and the rest of it. It's like, that's actually not the way it always is. That's the way it can often be for a lot of people, but especially as you start to release from the nervous system, it can actually be more of these very subtle or very mystical and spiritual experiences. And I see the journey through clients that have done 10, 15 sessions that started off being very, very emotional, very physical, and now they're extremely mystical and spiritual. And you can definitely see, and not to say that it is a linear process, but you can see over time the way that that does shift. So I always say to people, the trap is to not get attached to any particular outcome, especially a big one.
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting when you're talking about that, that brings us back to that whole buzzword. And, people see something on Instagram and they want this experience and they think it has to be a certain way. But I think, especially with modalities like breathwork, like meditation, all those really internal, deep modalities, I feel like you just never know what you're going to get, right? And that's the beauty of it. And at the end of the day, you have to trust that you are getting exactly what your body needs and what your being needs in order to move forward on that journey.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think that feeds back into people knowing the different styles of breathwork, the different types of techniques you can use, and it comes down to the purpose that you're using it for, what you need on that day. So sometimes you do need to charge your body up and feel a bit more energetic and vibrant and have a bit of a dopamine hit kind of thing. And you can absolutely do that. None of that. It's not to say that there's a right or a wrong, but it's just knowing and being the witness to what we attach to, what we chase, what we avoid. And that's why it's really, really important too for people to know who they're doing what style of breath work with. So what we're seeing a lot at the moment is people doing little weekend breathwork facilitated training courses and then going off and wanting to facilitate big groups and taking people through these deep immersive experiences, but they really don't have the training and the ability to do that. And not to say that one style is better than the other or to judge the whole process, but there's a big, big difference between teaching somebody some regulating, grounding, breathing techniques or taking somebody through a couple of rounds of Wim Hof, jumping in the ice bath and doing those kind of regular procedures. It's nowhere near the same as taking somebody into a deep, therapeutic, rebirthing, holotropic breathwork process. They are not the same. What's happening is you're getting a lot of people thinking they have the qualifications to do the deep experiences when they absolutely don't. So it is really important for people to understand the differences and know what to look for when they're finding the person and know what do they want. Are they looking for these breathing techniques that are going to help reduce stress, help me alleviate anxiety, help me increase my energies, help me recover from a busy day? Or are they looking for the deep transformational work that they really do need to find the right facilitator to guide them through that process? Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. And it's what you said. It's like, what's your purpose, right? Why are you going
That's
to
exactly
breathwork?
right.
What do you want to get out of it?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so for that reason, I actually am geared more towards doing smaller groups of around about 18 or so people as a maximum rather than a big group, so that I've got time to support each person and walk around the room and watch the way people breathe. And a lot of my people that come to my session on a regular basis comment and say that they do like that more personalized approach of not being in a big, overwhelming room with all of this energy around them.
Well, yeah, plus you're going through deeper experiences,
That's right.
So you need that facilitation. And again, it comes back to safety, what we discussed
Exactly
before as
right.
well, because you want to feel safe in that environment where you're potentially having quite a crazy experience.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And so that's why it's so important for people to understand what style they're doing and who they're being facilitated by, and how deep is it going to take them, and does this person really have the ability? Have they done the work themselves? It's one of the reasons why I'm doing a lot of the things that I've done recently, and making sure that I'm in the process as much as everyone else, because I'm only going to take people as deep as I've been myself and the capacity that I have to hold space for them. And you've got to make sure that person facilitating you can walk the walk as well as talk the talk. Absolutely.
It's really beautiful what you just said, and we talk a lot about that in coaching. It's like you can only take people as far as you have gone. And so if you don't do the work, you can't actually take people there, you know? So
you've got to
really
have experienced it, and you've got to have fully embodied it and understood it.
Yeah.
It's what makes someone a great teacher, right? Like somebody can read a textbook and try to convey that information to you, but it's the person who has had a real lived experience that can teach it to you in a way, because they can explain it to you in a different way that makes sense, because you can tell when they've actually experienced it through the way that they can explain it to you.
So, Mark, we were talking about the developmental themes and how the body themes are representing that within the way we show up. I'm also interested in hearing your opinion on, you know, how our personal work and that deep development work, where breathwork is one of those modalities that we can use in order to do that. You know, how can that support not just ourselves, but also our collective in the growth of our humanity, really, at the end of the day? How important is that work?
I think it's extremely important, and there absolutely is an element of working within ourselves, but then also working within the collective field of energy. That's why group breath work can be so powerful, because you're working within yourself, but you're also then working within the collective energy field of the people that are in the room around you, which then also has a ripple-on effect to the people that are around the people that are in the breathwork journey.
Yeah.
So it's something that I've heard for years that I often come back to, and it's that we're the sum of the 5 people we spend the most time with.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm sure you've heard that as well.
Yes.
So if you're the first one out of your friends that starts doing modalities like breath work, and then next minute one of your other friends starts doing a modality like breath work, then one of their friends hears about it and starts doing it, next thing you know, there's all these people that are doing this new healing modality, which then starts to multiply and amplify and multiply, doubles each time, because more people are open to the process and starting to experience the process. And that's how we then heal as a collective as well, because we're feeding onto each other.
Yeah.
And so as we develop and grow ourselves, we're also supporting and assisting the people around us to develop and grow at the same time. Sometimes that may happen, that the people around you grow with you. Sometimes they grow in the other direction, and that's totally fine as well. But I think what is important is to know that as we grow as a person, whether we realize it or not, we're actually supporting and encouraging and not giving permission as such, but showing those around us what can happen when you start doing these kind of modalities.
Totally.
And I know that is true for me and my experience with some of my friends as well.
Yeah.
One of the biggest lessons I learned when I first starting it was to not expect all of the people around me to start doing it as well.
Yeah.
You know,
because you get so excited about it, you're like,
right.
You guys should all do it. Like, it's the best.
Like, oh my God, you've got to do breath work. You've all got to do breath work. And someone's like, I don't want to do breath work. It's like, that's okay. But at the same time, though, it's interesting to notice that some of those people then start to come around, and because they get curious.
Yeah.
Then they hear more people doing it and more people doing it.
And they see you change, right?
And they see you change.
I think that's a big one.
And that's how we lead by example.
Yeah.
So I'm a firm believer that we will lead more by example than trying to talk somebody into it. Or it's like, you can't drag someone kicking and screaming, right? Like
100%.
Really the best way and the most effortless way and the most productive way for us, the path of least resistance, is to just continue on our path and our journey forward. and let the results speak for themselves. And that is way more powerful than trying to talk somebody into breath work or the newest healing modality. That as much as that would help them, you can't tell people. They have to find their own way, and they have to get there when they're ready. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's like showing by example, and if people see you change, they would want a piece of that, and then, you know, they get curious and they can go on the same journey. And like you said, if they don't, then they don't. Not everybody is supposed to walk the same path, at least
That's
at
right.
the same time, you know?
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think that's a big one, yeah. Because I'm the same. I'm always like, when I find something new, I'm like, you should do it, especially with my husband. I'm like, you need to do this, you need to do this. But I've learned that I just need to give him the space, you know, and sometimes he comes around to it and he does it in his own time. But me just telling him to do things usually doesn't go anywhere.
That's exactly right. And we're constantly sharing energy with those around us, whether we realize it or not. Like, everything is energy. Yeah, energy can't be destroyed. It can only be transformed. So energy is always being transformed. And so the energy that we have is going to eventually be shared with somebody else. The breath that we have is going to be eventually breathed by someone else. So whether you think that's great or whether you think that's a little bit kind of, you know, weird or not, it's like everything in the universe is energy, and it's constantly being transferred from one person to the other with every inhale and every exhale, moving from one person into the next. And so as we eventually continue to evolve and move forward within humanity, eventually it takes more of a roll-on effect, and that's why we keep going through different cycles of evolution as well.
Yeah. Oh my God, I could keep talking to you about this whole thing even
That's another
longer,
podcast.
But that's a whole other podcast. But before we're going to finish today's episode, tell us a little bit more about your brand. It's called X-Breath.
Yep.
What is that based on, and what's the story behind that? Like, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
And then we tell people, obviously, where they can find you and how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, so the X-Breath is really based on the idea of not really knowing exactly where the process is going to take you. So you can think of it in a couple of different ways, like X marks the spot, you know, looking for the secret treasure, right? Or the X factor, like you can't quite put your finger on it, but you know that just something's quite amazing. Like, it's that kind of concept of the mystical and the unknown, the whole idea of, if you look at the X itself, like energy colliding and then expanding back out. And so the word expansion is really what I based it on. So I talk about our expansion spiritually and energetically, but everything is constantly in a flux of expansion and contraction, like the inhale and the exhale. So the X's like that collide, that also implode and explode. It gets a little bit detailed, but constantly coming back to three main words that I use. The first one being the idea of expansion. So the X-Breath really stands for expansion breathwork. The idea of exploration, the idea of experiencing, the idea of expressing. So these are the main words that I was playing around with all the time. It was just like, well, some of them are a little bit long, and it's like you want to have something that's, you know, short and punchy and catchy. And it was like, well, the X-Breath. And so these are the words that I refer to all the time in a lot of my marketing and a lot of my workshops, but very much is focused on this idea of how do we expand as an individual, and how do we expand as a collective, and how do we come back to this idea that we're in this constant movement of inhaling, exhaling, expanding, contracting, opening, shutting down for a little bit, opening up, shutting down for a little bit. And that's really the process of continually moving. So everything has to have that gentle movement. Our cells are constantly vibrating. Everything's constantly in movement. It's not static. And that's really what the whole brand is based on.
Yeah. And I love that, because when you're talking about that everything's connected and that expanding out into the world, into the universe, I think, and we've talked about that already in terms of the collective healing, I think it's just such an important thing to do, you know, the work on ourselves, because sometimes it might seem like it's not a lot or we can't really do much, but I think if every person can take a little bit more responsibility and, you know, do that work and keep working on themselves, you don't even realize what a ripple effect it can have in this world, which really desperately needs it at the moment as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important to remember that the more that we help ourselves, the more we can help others.
Exactly.
And that's a ripple-on effect as well. And it comes back to that leading by example. Like, we help ourselves, we then have the capacity to hold a better space for those around us.
Yeah.
And then as we can do that, then they can hold a better space for the people around them, and so on and so forth. And it just continues to grow.
Yeah. Beautiful. Mark, thank you so much for your time, for your wisdom, for your knowledge, for sharing all your amazing work with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. That was epic. The 3 pearls of wisdom that I've gotten from today's conversation. The first one, and like I said at the beginning, breathwork is such a buzzword, and Mark has explained it really well today with talking about breathing techniques versus breathwork journeys. So they are the breathing techniques that you use on a day-to-day basis because you need more energy, because you're trying to get rid of stress, because you've got some anxiety around something. Or there's the real breathwork journeys, which is what Mark's doing, the therapeutic breathwork, where it's really deep, long journeys where you're really going into exploring the deeper themes of your own body and of your own being and working through that in a longer process rather than on an everyday basis. So I think that is a really important distinction to have there, to really know who you're seeing as a facilitator as well. Do you want somebody to just help you with everyday techniques, or do you really want to go on a deeper, but more transformative journey? Yeah. Then the second pearl of wisdom based on the therapeutic breath work is the reasons why you go and do therapeutic breathwork and breathwork journeys. You know, you can have emotional releases, you can have trauma releases, you can have rebirth releases. So it's not just about minimizing stress or anxiety, it's really looking at some deeper belief systems and, you know, deeper things that are affecting you in your life and seeing how you can work with breathwork to release those things in your life.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is the body themes that Mark has been talking about in terms of, you know, do you have a connection body theme, an attunement one, a trust or control theme, an enduring one, sexual identity and love one, and the fact that everything is energy and that the energy then manifests in your physical form, and then the way you show up in the world, you know, is based on that development that you've been going through. And so, you know, breathwork facilitators like Mark can look at your body and can help you even just by looking at yourself and the way that your body presents to know what some of the issues may be that are presenting, and help and guide you through that process in order for you to work through that and release things that might not be serving you anymore.
Yep.
That was the main 3 points. I mean, there was so much good stuff in there, but these were really the things where I'm like, okay, there's some real clarity for me around, you know, what is what and what's there for what purpose, so to speak.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, Mark, you have mentioned a few resources today. You know, we've talked about the morning start, a few other things. So I will put those ones into the show notes as well. But tell us where people can find you. You know, how can people get in touch with you? How can they reach out to you? And most importantly, how can they come and, you know, attend some of the breathwork sessions that you do?
Yeah, so in Sydney, I run regular monthly breathwork events. I also do private therapeutic breathwork in Sydney as well. I also run corporate wellness events where I go in and talk about different breathing techniques to help with stress reduction and energy levels. Also some meditation techniques to be used more in the corporate world. They can find me through my website, thexbreath, thexbreath.com.au. They can also reach out to me on Instagram, which is my name, markmoon_thexbreath.
Perfect. So yeah, get in touch with Mark if what you've heard today spoke to you, and if you want to go on the journey of breathwork, of therapeutic breathwork. I'll have to book in another session with you as well.
I look forward to seeing you next time.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. I really hope you got something out of this episode today. You know, we've really dived deep into breathwork and the different techniques that are there around breathwork, the body themes, the therapeutic breathwork, and what it can enable you to do and overcome, and how it can really support you live a more holistic life on a day-to-day basis as well. Please do share the podcast with your family, with your friends, or with anyone you think might benefit from the information that you've heard today. I really hope this episode brought some sunshine to your soul. I'm sending love and light your way, and until next time.